What a gift for me to be able to share a short reflection on the day that we celebrate and express gratitude for the work of our beloved administrator, Carol Smith. I've worked with Carol through all 11 years of her time here, and I have to say we've shared a lot of laughter, plenty of dreaming, a little scheming, and lots of imagining, and maybe a few frustrations and tears. Oh, and chocolate. How appropriate to be recognizing Carol in this space where we are reminded that it isn't only what we say and sing and read, but the images that we see or place on our sanctuary walls can draw us into the presence of God and reflect God's Spirit moving in this place. In our scripture reading, part of a foundational story of the Hebrew Scriptures, we read that under Moses' leadership, the Israelites followed what they understood to be God's dream and command to create and build a place of sanctuary and worship, offering the best of what they had, from gold and silver, lovely cloth, to pieces of wood, and even goat's hair, to bring what was beautiful and precious to honor and hold God close, even as they wandered through the desert, to carry with and within them a sacred and beautiful place of belonging that reminded them that all of God went with them as they journeyed. In today's church, we have a bit of an awkward relationship with liturgical art in our sanctuaries. While we are drawn to it and even beguiled by it, we worry that the art itself might draw us away from God rather than pointing to God. Yet we live in a world that is hungry for encounters with the divine. And beautiful liturgical art can provide a pathway to that encounter, not with words, but through evoking a sense of wonder and awe and mystery. Rather than becoming an idol, something worshipped for its own sake, visual art used in worship can serve as an icon, opening a window to the divine, helping us enter more fully into the story of the people of God and reminding us that beauty is God's way. You've seen behind me one of the stunning wall hangings that Carol and the visual arts team created. When I see Shasta daisies in my garden, I can't help but be reminded of this mural. But what we see here is only part of what is beautiful in this work. I can remember peeking in on some of the visual art group sessions and watching how under Carol's leadership, people tentatively and later with more confidence twisted and shaped and scrunched and glued remnants of recycled fabric to create something beautiful. And they celebrated each other and their gifts and what had been created. The process of creation and connection among the artists was truly beautiful. Many of you have expressed a desire to return to the sanctuary, and you long for the time to worship together in a familiar place that welcomes and embraces you, and perhaps for some is where you first came to know God. There is something about a sacred and beautiful sanctuary that draws us closer to the heart of God. The beauty of flowers, images, fabric draped over the communion table, light shimmering on a glass font, rainbows twinkling through the stained glass, a carved talking stick, the grain of wood on a table. Each work of art helps us reflect and honor the one whom we worship. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. But we are not together in this space right now. I have seen images of worship spaces you have created in your homes during these complicated times, and you have made those spaces beautiful. Perhaps your window frames your liturgical art, a view of a garden or a forest or a city street or an urban space. Perhaps you sit in a garden or a park or a forest gazing at a scene so beautiful it could only have been created by a divine hand. Some of you have brought beautiful fabric and candles and chimes, while another might cradle a beautiful sleeping infant or hold the hand of a loved one. How lovely is your dwelling place, O Lord of hosts. Ron Taylor, a professor of religion and nature at the University of Florida, tells about a trip he made with a group of environmental activists to a national forest site. He noticed that when the group entered what he calls the Holy of Holies, the most biologically diverse area in the forest, they used quieter voices, and there was a hushed reverence and calmness. But, he added, what makes a space in nature sacred only begins with its wild beauty or biodiversity. Contemporary religious studies would generally say that whether a religion's sacred space is a built or a natural environment, it's human activity that consecrates those places and makes them sacred. It is human activity, but activity that is intimately entwined with and responsive to God the Creator, and indeed the very humans themselves, that consecrates and makes sacred and beautiful the place, offering their broken and best selves. A beautiful sacred space is made up of the handiwork and heart work of people. The design of art and space, the offering of music, the proclaiming of the word, the filming or editing of a worship piece, connection to friend and stranger, the prayers of our hearts, and the work of our hands. Each of you in this space, whatever this is, reflects and creates beauty through the very act of being you and being fully present in God's presence. Over the years, there will be new art on these walls. There will be new images online, new chancel furnishings, new technology. Each generation will create what is beautiful and meaningful for them as they allow the Spirit to move through them. And we will continue to be beguiled by beauty and drawn into the continuing story of God's people and God's divine embrace. Many have raised up and created beauty in this sanctuary at Highlands. But this morning, we recognize and celebrate those gifts in Carol Smith. She has helped us to create this beautiful place in this time. She has gathered and supported and nurtured others in finding the artist within. And she has listened for and channeled the Spirit of God, the divine artist in each area of her work. Carol has opened our eyes to beauty in this place, to tell a story of a God who loves and connects us and whose Spirit infuses this sacred space with life. Blaise Pascal said, in difficult times, carry something beautiful in your heart. Carol always had something beautiful in her heart, and she has left something beautiful in our hearts and in this sacred space. Let's listen to her speak with Will about her art now.
Hi everyone, we are in the lower hall and we have pulled out all of the art pieces that Carol Smith, our church administrator over these last 11 years, has been kind of the instigator for. And Carol is here, and we thought that we would take a moment right now to share those art pieces and for Carol to talk about them a little bit. And this was the first one that you ever were involved with.
We were launching the Nativity Exhibit with Sandi, and was concerned that there was no backdrop. And I said, well, could I paint something for you? And they said, well, yes. And so I painted the scene of the three wise men on their way to Bethlehem, and I installed myself in the stairwell between the second and third floor, and people would come by and see me and say, well, what are you doing? Because it was a bit of a novelty. So I had great fun doing this because I felt like I was bringing something to Highlands that was sort of unique and different, and it was met with grace and approval, and so I was on my way. This little tiny piece was kind of the second one that I did for the Nativity Exhibit, just showing the lone shepherd, the shepherd boy with his little sheep, and looking in the manger at the baby Jesus. The theme of this comes from a hymn that we sing in church, and it's called Hope is a Star. We had great fun making these paintings and adding all the glittery bits. The design of the panels are such that when mounted on the wall, the background and the lines form a circle, embracing mother and child in the center. This came about after a discussion with our former minister, Cheryl, where I approached her and asked, could I make some art for the chancel? And she said, yes, but you need to involve the whole community. You need to bring other people in. You cannot put something up that you made by yourself. And I found another soulmate in the church, Wendy McNaughton, and between she and I, we hashed out some ideas. We did some samples, and we came up with a plan to create a sketch and then fill it in with fabric and glue. We involved a whole number of people from the church and from the community, people who had no artistic background, and it was a learning process for all of us. The fabric is all recycled and reclaimed fabric, so it's all diverted from the landfill.
And this one often comes out in the summertime.
I was inspired by a piece of pottery, but it also got me thinking about the spirit in our community, how the spirit flows through our community and flows through each of us and into each other and becomes part of who we are. And I wanted to show that spirit moving through us and through nature and inspiring us. This was wonderful to try to bring to life. So it's obviously for Pentecost, all the rich hues of oranges and yellows and reds, and it is representational of the bounty of the earth, the harvest, and the people of the earth benefiting from the harvest of the world. The people are all dressed in various sort of ethnic costume. They're happy, and the little bit of sparkle is actually the flames of Pentecost. So each person has a little flame of Pentecost, and they're all people of the world. So this piece was something that came from very deep inside that needed to come out. Not sure if it was the spirit at work in me or something that needed to be expressed. part of the community here. It needed to come out, and my buddy Wendy and I hashed it out and tried to figure out what this thing was that needed to be said and needed to be put on canvas and needed to be shared. Again, the thread that goes through a lot of these pieces is the Spirit moving in our wonderful and beautiful community. And the Spirit is at work here again. The Spirit is flowing through this magnificent wave and crashing down. The piece has huge energy and flow and form, and it's when you see it up in the chancel, it is breathtaking when you look at it. And so many people worked on this one and contributed to it. I can't list all their names, but Wendy and Chris and Diana and Anna, and they just go on and on. So this is not my piece. This is our visual arts team, and this is our community. This was a little bit painful to create because it was very personal for me and for a number of other people. Inspired by Chris Robertson, she had a great desire to honor the men and women who fought in our world wars, and I too wanted to remember them, and we tried to come up with an image that would honor that memory. It's a very provocative image. It is emotional, it's disturbing, it is also very serene, it is healing. When people walked into the chancel and they saw this, a number of people were taken aback. Some of the elements in this image are, of course, the lone soldier looking at the cross, evokes many memories of the time after the war. But there's a sense of reconciliation with the doves flying in the V-shaped pattern. My dad always talked to me about his experience in the war and how the pilots would fly in the V-shape. There were two people who worked tirelessly. Joy and Diana worked for days and days to put in gray after gray after gray to create this beautiful melancholy sky. It's hard to say where this came from, but I think there was a desire for playfulness. And Jesus would approve, I think, to have the image of his birth portrayed in this way, this folk art way. We had lots of people involved, and they had so much fun making all these crooked houses and funny houses with different types of fabric. We have our strange shepherds here going down the hill with their sheep. And then we have our little black sheep here. And we have our very elegantly dressed three wise men traveling on their way to Bethlehem. And then as we travel through the township of Bethlehem, and we end up at the stable with